about that. I hope I can share my screen because I want you to see the scriptures.
Yes, you can share.
Okay, yeah, it's now coming. That's good. All right, so just confirm to me that you, okay, I think I may have changed something in the setting there.
We can
Uh,
see the screen now.
okay, very good. All right, so talking about mentoring successors, a very, very important topic for everyone, really. Because when you think about successors, it's somebody taking over from what? Someone succeeding you. So it could be at family level, it could be at office level, it could be at university level. I mean, just now we've been talking about, we've been with the staff and the students, basically every area of human endeavor. Now, there's a research done by Deloitte, and they came up with this statistic that 86% of leaders believe leadership succession planning is an urgent priority. But they found that only 14% believe they do it well. So 86% believe it's important, but only 14% believe they do it well. And as we talk about succession, think broadly. It's we're not just talking about an office job, though it applies there. Everything you're doing, just think of everything you're doing as a family. If you think of a business, family business, how is it moving to the next generation? Having enough capable leaders is a challenge for many, many organizations. And this is where succession and mentoring your successor comes into play. But there's an art to it. What has been shown is that when experienced people leave any type of organization, they often take with them the capacity to do work, not only capacity to do work, but also the wisdom, the things they have learned over time that have enabled them to be successful. They often move with that. So when you talk about mentoring your successor, we're not talking about just planning for replacement, but also thinking through what you have to do when you leave, and just ensuring how do you retain the wisdom of the years in the organization. How do you retain it when that person has gone? And for this to happen, you've got to be very intentional. Otherwise, we fall into a problem where we just choose successors. Sometimes you can choose, of course, if it's in the family, maybe a different setting, but you can choose a successor who are like you, just like you, because you like them, instead of those that are aligned with your mission and what you want to see happening in the future. So this is a very important topic for all of us. It's something that I've been grappling with in many ways. I've also had the experience of starting things and leaving them to others, and seeing how they perform. I've been involved in many, many Christian organizations, quite a number of them. Started off initiatives and stepped back. So I've learned lessons. I've burnt my fingers also a number of times. I'm not just talking about success. I've also seen failures. I want to cover three things. One is just to highlight the importance of having a mindset. It's just a mindset that is generational, that sees beyond. And also we'll explore some views on succession and some essentials. We'll talk about some essentials. I don't want to be so academic. I'll try and illustrate it as much as I do, examples as much as I can. Some suggestions on getting started as well. Now, many of you would remember that incident. That incident happened. If you show it, most people would remember. This was September 11th, 2001. This was probably a very, very big one. It involved a lot of CEOs perished there. So think of a time when an organization, somebody important left, and the impact that it had. This was so sudden, because one minute they were okay, a few minutes later they were gone. I've had the experience myself of losing and seeing I learned this the hard way in my organization. And Jubilee did it some years back. We lost an accountant, and the business was about to collapse, really. Not collapsing in that we're not seeing patients, but there was a very big crisis. And that brought home to me in a very strong way the importance of having people who can step into a place. There are key roles, and in HR they'll talk about key roles. You've got to identify them. It's not just at the top, but which are the key roles that must always be undergirded. It is said that when the World Trade Center collapsed, 172 corporate vice presidents lost their lives. 172. Think of the impact that had in organizations. Now, often it's not this bad. These are very, very outstanding kind of examples. But often it's just like the example I gave of us losing someone leaving, just saying they're leaving, and then there's a crisis. So what is succession planning, or this is planning, succession planning. This is part of mentoring your successor, really. So that's the process of developing talent to meet the needs of your organization. And I'm talking broadly here. It can even be church. How do you develop the talent to meet the needs of the organization? Now, current needs, because even as you look at your current situation, now there are some needs. You may have leaders there, but they're lacking in some areas. How do you develop that, but also in the future? So we're not talking about, there's also a term called replacement management, which is finding gaps to fill vacancies. So planning to ensure that what you're doing has a good future and has good leaders in store. And sometimes it's a challenge because current leaders get very nervous. And I've faced this as well, even as working as a dentist. In the beginning, I found it very, very hard to entrust my patients to somebody else until I realized, man, you can't treat the whole world. And the people you bring on board may not be as good as you, or you think they're not good as you, but you've got to begin the process of allowing them to learn and make mistakes. In that first phase of my work, I was doing work all by myself. And I remember when I started off, I never took any break for 1.5 years. By the time I took a break, I was burning out. So I was forced to allow somebody else to see my patients. And then become more comfortable. And then even some of them to take my patients, some of my stuff. Yeah. But I experienced what it is, And I see it now also in some places that I have oversight, that some people do not want anyone else to do what they're doing because they're insecure. These are a bit of difficult waters and can make mentoring a bit tricky, because unless you've chosen your person who's going to follow, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you're just working with a team of people and you're not sure who exactly will step in. So you've got to bring them up, but also communicate. I think it's making it a culture. Recently, I met with my staff and I had to emphasize this because of a certain situation we're facing in one department. I said, no one should hold the organization at ransom. The organization should not suffer because somebody's missing or somebody's on leave. So we've got to make sure that every position has somebody undergirding it. So that even if you go away, we may not have the very best. If we're operating at 100%, maybe we'll operate at 80, but we'll operate. We'll not just go down to 0. And if that is emphasized a lot, even, and as I say, I'm speaking very broadly, but I'm believing that you'll find application, whether it's a family situation or a small business or an organization or something else. If that is talked about by the top leader and the top leader themselves, they don't have this insecurity. They actually are actively helping others to come up. People begin to relax and let go of their insecurities. Recently, I told someone, you see, if you don't train other people, then you can't go and leave. You can't. You can't. Basically, we have to keep disturbing you. I've got to call you. I don't want calling you when you're on leave. So once people begin to understand also that this is not necessarily taking them away, then they begin to that as you raise them up, as you raise other people up, you actually graduate to a new level yourself. Now let's talk a little bit about these are dictionary definitions. A generation is all the people in a group or country that are of a similar age, especially when they're considered as having same experiences or attitudes. So generation, I know in the Bible talks about 40 years or so, that generation, like the generation of the wilderness, they had a certain mindset. And that, unfortunately, it's a bad mindset. So God had to get rid of them and bring another generation, the Joshua generation, which had a different mindset to enter the land. The mindset of the Moses generation could not enter the land. So people who are of a similar age are, that can all have similar experiences. You can talk about the war generation. They experience something together. Today we have a generation that has not experienced war. And my prayer for this generation is, God help our country never to go into war again, because people don't know what war is. But you see, if you've been through the war, you have a certain mindset. That's a generation. Can also be a period of time, about 30 or 40 years, for children to grow up, become adults, and have children of their own, and begin to take over what their parents were doing. Merriam-Webster talks about it as a group of people having contemporaneously a status, such as that of students in a school, which each one holds only for a limited time. I was telling the dental school party today that, when I stopped teaching many years back, and you invited me back, I found a different generation of students. The way they behave towards lecturers, the attitude to studies, study methods, completely different. I've had to learn again how to teach this group, and I'm still learning, because loud learning never ends. So this is the concept of a generation, and it tells us that life is mortal. It reminds us that we're immortality, at least as long as the resurrection of the dead has not yet taken place, life is not immortal. In a family unit, we have grandparents, parents, children, and when this is working well, there's interaction between 3 generations, and life is being transferred. By living together, life is being transferred, and children begin to learn from their parents, from their grandparents. And this is God's design. This is the way we're created. Succession from one generation to the other. Human life is a progression of generations. Older generations at the front, younger generations following at the back. So things like culture, lifestyle, philosophy, all these things, wisdom, they're inherited from older generations. And when this is not done, there's a generation gap. And it happens in the workplace as well. It happens in the workplace or in business as well. The legacy or the fruit that you get from older generations becomes the seed for the younger generations. So as the older generations leave the stage, the younger ones begin to come in. And if mentoring has not happened intentionally, then there can be a gap. And so we talk about mentoring a successor, we're talking about, very, very deliberately working so that progression happens. If it's not deliberate, what happens? Things collapse, things begin to collapse. This is what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So each of us needs to go beyond a one generation mindset. God made life to move from generation to generation. And if we are to work well, we need to work there. Now, when I look at my own life, there are things that I've done well, there are things that there are places I've made mistakes, and we can learn from this. So let's look at God himself, just to underscore. God is generational. God is very, very generational. He's transgenerational. He never does anything with his eye on just one generation. And this is very, very clearly brought out by the psalmist in Psalm 78, verse 1 to 8, says, "Give ear to my people. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I'll open my mouth in a parable. I'll utter dark things from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have taught us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell them to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast and whose spirit was not faithful to God." So when you count here, you actually count four or five generations. There's a generation, if we go back, let me just take it back. Okay, so from of old, that's actually much sayings from of old that is going far, far back. Huh? Our father's generation, then their children, and then the coming generation. You see this thing, God intended that things are passed on, truths. Now, there are truths about God, but there are truths about life. If you study the truths that God gave Moses, you look at the books Moses wrote, they affect all of life. There is something to do with governance and politics. There are business ideas there. It's not just the 10 Commandments. No, it is all of life. So business is in there, education is in there, communication is in there, family life is in there. And these were truths that God intended would be passed on from generation to generation. And so in mentoring your successor, wherever it is, this is the kind of blueprint we're looking at. God is a generational God, and effective leaders have a transgenerational thinking. Transgenerational thinking. This is a quote from James Freeman Clark, that the difference between a politician and a statesman, now this is an area of politics, that a politician thinks about the next election, while the statesman thinks about the next generation. We need a lot more statesmen in government who are looking beyond just whether we win the next election or not, but they are making painful decisions now to help the generations that are coming in the future. And you can say that for your family as well. Many of us have parents who sacrificed. They did not have what we have today, but they paid the price so that we could have what we have today. Now, if we kill it here, then we are really being, an evil generation. We should similarly be doing things for the children and the other children. They can enjoy what we didn't enjoy. We couldn't just say, for us, we suffered. You guys don't know what suffering is. Well, not that they shouldn't. They should have their own share of suffering because they also learn through that. But things should be in such that they lay the stage. We lay the stage for them to climb higher, and they lay the stage for the next generation to climb higher. And that means we are more than we're more aware that more than just our immediate environment. Okay, so let's look at some of the implications of I think I need to move faster. We don't have too much time to go into detail, but I want to show you some more scriptures here. This was the preacher, and he makes some very profound statements. In his state of despondency, he says, I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, my mentor, my successor rather, who knows whether he'll be either be wise or a fool, yet he'll be a master of all for which I toil and use my wisdom under the sun. Isn't that a very, very discouraging thought? That you work so hard, but the person who comes after you may just mess it all up. So how do you mitigate that? This is why you need to mentor and do as much as you can. Every generation has its own choice to make, but do everything within your power to ensure that when someone takes over from you, they will be in a place where they don't waste. So he says, this is also vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and talent, knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by somebody who did not toil for it. This is also vanity and a great evil. So Solomon had seen life from all angles because he wore many hats. He was a political leader, he was a nation builder, he was a parent, he was a researcher, he was an educator, he was a businessman, he was a philosopher. He was respected globally in his time. We read about him advancing the fields of zoology and botany. He earned respect not only from what we may refer to as a layman, with his own country, but also other significant political figures. Philosophers had great respect for him. Kings traveled to see him, and queens, the Queen of Sheba. So, therefore, in quoting him, I'm not trying to create a religious tone. I'm actually referring to somebody who was very, very significant in the 10th century BC. So what do we see in this statement? The burden he had. Not in producing success, he was very successful, but in sustaining it. Now, when you look at his own life, you do realize that his son Rehoboam, who came in, was not a wise man, which was so sad, because he made a foolish decision. 1 Kings chapter 12, 13. First, he made a foolish decision. And the nation split into two, and he remained the tiny part of that nation that his father had built. He remained with only two tribes. So Solomon was burdened about this, and probably had good reason to be burdened. Now remember, Solomon had been mentored by his father. David had his challenges of being a parent because the first sons were not well mentored. You remember the first sons, Absalom. Ammon rapes his sister, Tamar. Absalom overthrows his father. And then you have another one who tries to take over at his last towards his death. But Solomon had time, and so he writes us the proverb, says, when I was a young child, I sat on my father's feet. I think that David had learned in his later years how to, he had learned from his mistakes. So he spent time with his son. And that's one thing I want to emphasize, deliberately spending time in the workplace with the children, if it's a family setting. Not just to teach them what to do, but for them to learn wisdom from you. Solomon went beyond the limitations and the pleasures of the immediate, and he began to be concerned about a time when he would not be there. How wonderful it would be if all of us, politicians, CEOs, parents, would enter this same dimension of reasoning. What will happen when I'm not there? What can I do now to help that situation? And Solomon clearly had no trust in, the institutions at the time. He conquered the thought that just organizing institutions would get things to work. He was looking at the man, the person, the people that would take over. So this is the challenge we have at all levels, and the challenge we are talking about. How do we? And the reason I believe you chose this topic is because you're thinking about this. Whatever you set up, in the human being to run it. You may set up a big business, but there must be a human being to run it. We see it in government. You set up a government, there must be human beings. You may set up all these systems. We're all going to need the next leader, and we need to think about what we can do to influence that, so that it's a good next step. And he also realizes that there's not so much sense in working hard and not have empowered somebody to take over. This is the challenge that we face. And this is the challenge that Solomon brings to us. So producing this kind of person, your successor, implies that you'll have to empower them, you'll have to train them, you'll have to be involved with them. You've got to let them go out, preferably when you're still around. That is the best time, because it allows you to give advice and correct things when you are still there. Of course, human beings still make their choices. You can't control them, but you can do whatever it is within your power. Yeah. And I think embedded here also is a sense that this thing of training your mentor is not supposed to be left to circumstances. You can do something. Solomon realizes here that the mentee or the whole succession process does not begin when you're handing over. That handover meeting, when you hand over the books or the files or whatever, there has to be a deliberate effort. Unfortunately, he learned it from his father, but he never really did it well himself. Now, there's a very sad story about King Hezekiah. In Isaiah 39, you can go back and read it. When Hezekiah heard that when he was going to die, he prayed and God healed him. And then when he was healed, people from Babylon came to congratulate him, supposedly. He showed them everything. Then the prophet Isaiah comes and challenges him about what he has done, and then gives him this word, saying, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house, that which your fathers have stored up until this day, they have worked to build it up. All of it's going to be carried away. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your own sons who will come from you, whom your father shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. We know one of these people was Daniel. And the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. He said, this is when Hezekiah responds. For he thought there will be peace and security in my days. What a sad situation. This is a one generation mindset where you just think, as long as I'm okay, even I hear statements, Me, I'll do my own stuff. The children will take care of themselves. Yes, they will. But I hope you've done enough to ensure that when they come to those decision points, they'll have been equipped enough. So they make a choice. You can't control the choices they make. At least you've done everything to ensure that when they do, they have learned, they built some inner stuff to be able to manage well. All right. This kind of mindset is a very proactive mindset. It means training. So from Solomon again, training, and that is not just speaking. We do train, we spend time, we correct. It's a very, very personal sort of thing. This is, as we talk about training your successor or mentoring your successor, there has to be a very deliberate effort. And as I say, I'm speaking very broadly here, because when you talk about your successor in whatever it is, maybe a small thing, it has to do with being with them, showing them how things are done, and then letting them do. That's a difficult thing for many people, beginning to let them do things, and then coming back with them and saying, how did this happen? What are the lessons you learned? What are the mistakes we learned? What are the things we should not do again? To a point where you can step back and let things run. If we do this well, then you begin to have organizations that can go on without you. And I think one of the tests that you can ask yourself, think of what you're doing now. Think of anything. And I see there are 108 people on call, maybe 107, excluding me, or at least gadgets connected. But I also believe that behind those gadgets are probably 1 or 2 or 3 other people. So we may easily be talking to 200 people now. Now, each of you just think of everything you're doing now. Which are those things which, if you left, you went away? I'm not saying you died, no? You just imagine you went away for 6 months for some reason. You were sick, or you went on holiday, or something happened. Will those things continue to run when you're not there? I think that is a very good test for you. If the answer is no, the answer may also be yes, some of them. So you need to note down which are those things which, if I'm not there, will not happen. Let me go back to the Jubilee Dental story. When I started, I was alone. So surely those days, if I didn't work, nothing happened. But it has grown to a point where I think I can go for a whole year now and things will continue working, because we've built up people, we've built up systems that can be sustained. Now, they may not work 100% without me, but ideally, if you have trained a good successor, things should even be better without you. That's a difficult thought for many leaders. But I remember one particular organization that I stepped away from. We started it up, we got it running, and then some years back, I stepped back from it. Recently, I was invited back to see what they were doing, to speak to them, and I was so pleased, because they have taken what we started with and taken it to another level. And I told them I'm glad I left, because I wouldn't have done what you're doing now. So just ask yourself, since this is a practical thing, ask yourself now, which are those things which I'm doing now? And by the way, this is for everyone. You may just be a prefect in a school, but the things you're doing, if you were not there, would it happen without you? Or have you made yourself so indispensable that, everyone must be looking for you? Because that's another mindset that some people have, I must be the one doing everything. Okay. So being proactive trainers, and seeing that, this is the cycle of life. One day I'll not be here. What will happen? Now, I can't say I've got everything right. I still have, when that question I've asked you, when I ask myself, there are still some areas I say, in this area, no, I don't have an answer yet. I'm working at it, but I don't have an answer. So I'm throwing a challenge to all of us here. Now, usually when I do this, let me just see what this is. So these are general points that you should think about when you're looking at mentoring your successor. Are there skills that need to be developed? Are there skills? So is there any skills? You may sit down and write down, what are the skills that are needed for my job? And how can I help those who are stepping up develop them? Now, some situations are more technical than others. Then there's a question of actually mentoring. So listing that and then very deliberately mentoring. Sometimes it's assigning the person to even sending them to other people. Say, I want you to grow in this area, so I'd like you to spend time in this department or with so-and-so or with another organization so that you can learn to grow in the area. So again, I can't be too definite here. I'll probably just give some examples, but being very, once you listed those skills, you begin looking for where can or how can we get this to grow, and then you get feedback. How do you get feedback? Constant feedback and coaching. Letting people make mistakes. Not when mistakes happen, it shouldn't be like the end of the world has come. I know places where people are so afraid to make mistakes that they can't make a decision. Because the last time someone made a mistake, they were hammered so hard on the head, they almost died. So now everyone says, they just keep throwing the ball to the other person. The other person throws the ball. In medicine, we have what, at least, a dental, but I remember in our training, we did pathology, and we attended what they called, those pathology meetings. I'm sure there are doctors on the call. You go in there and it could be a medical ground round. They give you the case. The patient came with this. We were treated this way. We thought it was this. We did everything we could. The patient died. Now the pathologists come. These are the ones who know everything, but it's too late. They'll cut up the body. They'll examine. And sometimes they find out that you are treating a completely the wrong thing. Now the purpose of doing that is you can't resurrect the dead. Unless you have the gift of miracles. The purpose of doing that is to learn. What do we learn? So next time you see someone like that, you say, the last time we treated this person this way. Now, I still remember some of those cases. There was a girl, I remember, one vivid picture I remember in medical school, a young girl who had died. And they were treating something else. And when they opened, they found the lady had committed an abortion. And that was what has brought complications. And I don't remember why they missed that, but that I've never forgotten that, So next time someone is coming, you have all these things in your mind. Now in work or in a business or something, you should also have these sort of times where something goes wrong and you conduct a post-mortem, not to blame anyone, but just to say something went badly wrong here. What do we learn? What did we learn? And when you do this deliberately, and people learn that it is okay to make mistakes, so long as you're not making them foolishly, you grow in wisdom as you go through the sort of reviews, feedback. So sometimes you may find that the person that you're working with is not necessarily the best. And so you have a backup. If you're talking about HR specifically, they talk of having a strong bench strength. You see this in football. Those of you who are football fans know that these big teams, which I'm not particularly a fan anymore. I used to be, but my whole family supports one team. These days, I just go. If I watch, I just watch. I got too tired of my teams losing, so I don't like the emotional problem of losing. So I just watch with a detached sense, and I just enjoy the game. But I can watch when I see part of my family watching. Sometimes they even fail to sleep because their team lost. The next day they're under depression. But you see, if you take these strong teams, they have team A, team 2. Some of them have team 3. There's a time they'll play team 2. And man, you look at team 2 and you wonder, why aren't these guys playing in team 1? Because they're very, very good. And so if someone gets injured, they replace that person with another player, and you wish the old player was back. Well, this one becomes even more dangerous. Teams like that are said to have a strong bench strength. Those sitting on the bench are very strong. And it doesn't apply always. You can't talk about bench strength if you're talking of 2 children or 3 children, unless you have many children in that setting. But in an organization, if I'm not talking about organizations, church can be church, it could be church organization, it could be a business organization, it could be an NGO, it could be an academic organization. It is always good to, whenever possible, build a strong bench strength so that you don't struggle too much. One person moves, you can move another person in that place. And this can only happen very, very deliberately. Okay, I think I'm going to skip this part here because it doesn't very much relate to our theme, but very much here. So let's move. I think I should be winding up so that if there any time for questions, we can talk about them. So one is you have to determine that you're going to do it. As I said, it's very, very intentional. How are you going to do it? Now, this can be difficult in a family setting. Let me bring it home to myself. I was, I mean, the Lord led me, and there's a long story how I ended up where I am. Let me talk about dentistry, for example. My wife is a teacher, so I ended up in school. I remember one time in the family table, we talked about, I asked the family, we have church for children, who is going to be a dentist? And they all said, ah. So I shut up. I never did anything else. Now, many years later, one of my sons expressed interest so I got involved in helping him. He's actually one of those graduating on Friday. And I got involved in helping him, make a choice. And that time UC was starting. So I told him this may be the best place to study. It's new, but, pioneering. I've been a pioneer myself. I encouraged him to apply there, and he did. Now, it doesn't always happen that way, and we need to be careful that we do not force children into things that they're not supposed to do. I know that question comes up. As a parent, you're talking in the family sense now. You need to prayerfully ask the Lord to guide, to show you. And I remember I used to pray and say, Lord, where should my children, what giftings do they have? Where should I be encouraging them? Because they don't know themselves. If you have young children, keep praying and asking God to show you where they should be inclined. And they'll show you. And we also know that life is not one thing. I'm not only a dentist, I do many other things. I'm now into teaching as well. I'm into leadership development. So it's not just one thing, but the point I'm making here is that God will show you which way the child should go as you listen to him, and you can begin to help and encourage that child and provide opportunities. That is in a family setting. But also it may be that if it's a family business, not necessarily that person is the one to take over, not necessarily. So the situations differ. But even then, even if it's not that person, there should be there should be a system or setup that would encourage that thing to move the next generation. The issue of transgenerational or family businesses, which are transgeneration, is a challenge in Africa. Many times they say when the person, by the time, even before the person is buried, we've seen examples in this country, the business is already being torn apart. Now, the only way this can be mitigated is by setting up systems. There's people, yes, people are important. And if there's a person who has been provided, that person should be helped to step into that role. But if not, then a system can be set up that would ensure that beyond the founder, things continue to run. That is something we still have to learn. And we have some good examples. I would probably not want to mention names here, but we have examples where things have moved to the next generation. And I don't have a non-case studies here to study how that happened, so I can't really quote that. But when you go to Europe, I'm told the company that makes wigs for judges in the UK has been there for hundreds of years, and it's a family business, So how do they manage it? There's a book called Built to Last by what's his name? There's someone who wrote From Good to Great. Jim, I forget the second name. They bring out very good principles on how to set up organizations so that they move to the next generation. So I'd encourage you, if you want to read that book, Built to Last, gives out principles of setting up organizations in that way. It's something we need to build here. But moving away from the person, from the business side, organization side, let's take it beyond to church. Most of our Church of Uganda has a good system, whereby leadership succession happens and things are moved on, at least at the top level. But take it down to the youth group, take it down to the women's groups and so on. Are we actively choosing and helping successors? I remember Miles Monroe making a statement which I first said, wait a minute, that cannot be true. But when I thought about it, I thought that's right. This topic is so important. He was saying that Jesus, before, he says the first job of every leader is to choose a successor. I thought, what? So it says before you start office. Now, it may not work out practically like that, but he then illustrates it with Jesus, saying that Jesus, if you look at the way he built his ministry, before he began preaching, he chose the 12 to be with him. That says that to be with him, and then he would send them out. So there's that element of being with him, and then he sent them out. And so he chose his successors from the beginning. Now, you may not be able to do that in that same way, but at least it should be something at the front of our mind saying, beyond me, who's going to do this thing I'm doing? And as you pray and watch, God will show you. I'm also very, when you look at Moses did not take things for granted. He led the children of Israel for 40 years, but if you read the book of Numbers, he didn't just assume it was Caleb or Joshua or any of the other elders. We see Moses praying to God. I didn't know pull out that verse, but you can find the book of Numbers saying, Lord, these people are like sheep without a shepherd. Choose a person who will lead them. Now, remember, Moses had sons, and it didn't turn out that his sons was one of them. But God then chooses Joshua. God is the one who told him Joshua is the next person. As you know, Joshua, there was Caleb, there were two of them. Any of them could have been very good candidates, but God chose Joshua. So choosing and then working. And the lesson we learned from Moses is that this whole thing is important because God is transgenerational, that God is interested. Remember that in everything you're doing for God. And when I say for God, I'm a marketplace person. I'm not talking about the pulpit, preaching or whatever. That is part of it. But everything else we do is for God. If we believe that verse which says, whether you eat or drink, do it all for the glory of God. Everything you're doing, it may be running a shop, it may be working as a teacher, everything you're doing, this thing God is interested that it moves on to another generation. So we can ask him saying, Lord, show me, like Moses said, show me, choose a person, and then we can work with them. Okay. So here it's talking more in an organization sense, setting goals and then standardizing. Now, standardizing is something that if you're in an organization setting, we're going through an ISO training process, International Standards Organization, and I've learned some very, very useful things. Again, related to this, that most times we leaders have things in our heads. If you ask, how is this done? It is all in your head. It's all in your head. Now, in succession planning, you actually get it moves from your head. It moves from your head to paper. You write it down, and it's been a very interesting system for us as we worked at Jubilee Dental specifically, writing down things and writing down policies and procedures. That's the process of downloading. So all of a sudden, somebody who's very good at the front desk and welcoming customers now will begin to see how to do it, and it's written down. It is written down. So standardization helps. When you now begin to create a culture, it's written down and you follow. Now, I'd like to begin concluding here. I'd just like to reinstate that planning and mentoring is very, very deliberate, because life is both a product of history and something we've received from others, but also we have a seed for the future. In us, a seed for the future. And it's important that we have a very strong transgenerational mindset as we carry a burden in one generation. We carry that burden to equip and empower and prepare future generations of workers or students or whatever it is. We're giving them a value system, we're giving them wisdom, we're giving them skills and competences for future possibilities, involving them. A lot of that has to do with involving them in the work that we do, and the time to start is now. One of the things I did with my children was to get them to work. In the olden days, what used to happen is if the family had a farm, we worked in farms. You go and work in the garden, and the children are taught from a young age to work in the garden. That was the way of life in those days. These days, we don't, at least in the urban centers, we don't have gardens. But if you're running a business or you even have a workplace, it may be if it's a government workplace, you may not be able to do this. But getting children to be involved in some work in an area of interest doesn't have to be in what you're doing, but get them to work in an area of interest, and let them experience what it is to get their hands dirty, as it were, being deliberate. All our children went through during some holidays. They were working at the front desk at the clinic and so on. That is, by the way, how one of my sons picked up interest. After having said it would not go, none of them would do it. They begin to find their places and calling. So succession, and I'm here talking about mentoring as well, part of succession. It's often something we are too busy to do when things are good, but it's very expensive to do when things are bad. So we never do it. But may God help us change that. And I know this topic, you can blow it up. A lot more can be said about it. And may God help us all to do that. As I'm still a student of it, I'm still learning, I'm still asking God questions about some areas I'm involved in. But what I wanted to highlight today is that we've got to be very, very intentional to raise people in everything that we do, and spend time with them. Spend time. It's not something you just do as you hand over a file, but actually spend time and let them spend time in what we are doing, whatever it is we are doing. Step back and let them lead when you're there. So when you leave, they shouldn't miss you too much. They shouldn't miss us too much when we leave, because they already know what to do. So may the Lord help us all as you work in mentoring your successor. And if there's still time, I don't know that I've taken all the time. If there's still time, I would be glad to respond to more specific situations if that is what you normally do. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Hallelujah. Praise God. I think, thank you very much. We can give him flowers. We can give him claps. We can give him drinks. We can post in our chats flowers unto him. Thank you very, very much, Doctor. We are truly humbled and we are thankful. Personally, have learned a lot as far as this discussion is concerned. One, I have learned that we need to be transgeneration. We need to have a transgenerational thinking like Jesus. And I have learned a lot, but because of time, I have some questions that we would like you to help us in. Some people have asked various questions that in the remaining time, we can try to answer. Someone has asked and has said, he's saying, what key skills or competencies should I focus on developing to advance in my career? What key skills or competencies should I focus on developing to advance in my career? And if you go in the chat, there are many more questions that people have forwarded that we would like you to help us in. Someone has asked, Bob Kasime has asked and is asking, saying, how does one handle succession within a family without causing sibling hatred, where the most fit to be heir is not the oldest? And another one has asked, this is Dixon, has said, there are parents who fear to mentor their children for fear of cheating them. How can such parents be helped? And also our brother has also asked another question that we would like you to answer, and he's saying, how does one handle succession within a family without causing sibling hatred, where the most fit? Okay, I think I've answered this. I've asked this one. And lastly, but not the least, because there are many questions. Someone is saying, I work with youth. One of them told me he wants to be a carpenter after senior 4, though he likes it. He likes it. I tried to discourage him to opened a wide spread of careers, but he insisted. How do I help such a young man since it's right to help them do what they feel is better? So I think for the meantime, you can be answering some of these questions as people are forwarding more and more.
Okay, what I would suggest, how much time do we have for this?
I think you can answer them like five minutes.
Okay, well, the best way to do it is just, we'll take one by one. I'll make very brief comments. Then we can do
yes,
many.
please.
Yeah,
Yes.
So the first one was about which competences. And I think that's it just depends on what you're doing, because the competences are linked to, they're general leadership competences, decision making, having a clear vision and stuff like that. Those are leadership competences. But then one of the most important things is character. And that one will only be when you're with people. Pointing out things during last can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, please, we are hearing you.
Sorry, I got an interruption. My phone connection, someone was trying to call me. I was at a wedding, and the young man wedding, who had had the opportunity to counsel them, said, he gave a testimony. He was saying about his father who was departed. He said, when my father, one time, they had a situation, and the father told the father, oh, I'm going to do this, and it was actually a lie. He says the father stopped and told him, my son, in Uganda, never lie. Now, he says he has never forgotten that. He has never forgotten. Those things come as you're working. Now, that was not a legal thing teaching him about law. It was something which he says he learned. His father just stopped everything he was saying and told him that. So being with people. So there's character. There are skills. If your work is technical, then you teach technical skills. So I think that really depends on the context, what you learn. That's why I say you need to sit down and say what is important in this area. Then you list them out and you see how we can develop them, and even sit down and say, we're going to work on this. You have a plan. Can you bring the next question? Help me just bring the next question one by one, and then we can move quickly, just one by one. What was the next one?
One by one?
Yeah.
Oh, the next one, maybe let me just bring this one very quickly. This one is saying, how do you create a succession plan in a department within an organization whose head doesn't believe in such plan?
That is a problem. That's a very big problem. And if there is somebody above that head who can be helped to understand, then then that could be an approach. You could also expose, if there was a way in exposing, you've got to be smart, wise on this, that you don't cause trouble unnecessarily. But also bringing in somebody who can talk about the need. This human resource people will tell you this is a very key part of human resource, because it's a very big headache. That person doesn't want to do. One time that person won't be there, so you'll have a crisis. So the first stage is just create awareness of the need, whether it is through sharing an article in the WhatsApp group or whatever, but or getting someone to come in. There must be an awareness caused somehow, and but that's the first stage. And then once that is there, then you can slowly move people towards beginning to appreciate the importance of it's very important. No organization should be held hostage by an individual. That shouldn't happen. Let's go to the next one.
A very quick one. This one is saying, how does one handle succession within a family without causing sibling hatred, where the most fit to be the heir is not the oldest?
Okay, now we're mixing up things here. We're not talking about inheritance. That is different. when it comes to inheritance, every child should have an inheritance. And Kenya now, even the daughters have inheritance. And I think now we're coming to that stage where it's not only the boys. That's different. But we are talking about, okay, if it's a successor to lead the family, that's one issue. If there's a family business, then you'll need to figure out, how that business would best run. And the children be exposed. They can be exposed. Many of these things are best done. This conversation has been so much. We've been talking a lot about it at home. And one of the things you realize that it's best done when you're still there. When you're still there. Once you're not there, things change. So whether there are problems within them and so on, it's best to happen when you're there. I see a lot of Arsenal supporters. I just want to clarify, I'm not an Arsenal supporter. My family is, but I'm not. I've had too many painful nights when Arsenal has lost. Not by me, but my sons are all Arsenal supporters. Of course, they don't live with us now, but you can see the family chat having a big conversation when things happen.
Yeah, maybe someone you may handle this one. Someone is saying in instances where your children are not interested in what you are doing, yet you have many ventures investing for them. What do you do?
That's a challenging one. Pray. That is something you always do. If God has led you to do those things, and that's the point I'm making. If God has given you and led you to do those things, He has a future for them. Maybe the successor may not come from within, and that's a difficult one for parents to take, but maybe not. I've had to grapple with that myself and say, well, if none of this takes interest in this, what do we do? How do we set it up to continue? Because if whatever you're doing is blessing other people, it should continue to bless other people when you're not there. So what structure can you set up? And I don't have one answer on that, but I'd say number one, pray. That is number one. Just pray and ask the Lord, what is the future of this thing or this thing we're involved in?
Okay, maybe the last one, there are many questions, but maybe the last one, how does a succession plan work in an organization that does surprise transfers? Like you find you're here and you're trying to mentor someone, but from nowhere you're transferred. How does it work?
Well, they are limited there by the system. You're limited by the system, and I would want any organization that really wants to move ahead, and this is a problem at the top. I'm not saying don't transfer people, but that one of the things that should happen when you're transferring is say who can take that spot. And there may be reasons why people are being transferred. There are obviously reasons. I hope they're good reasons. I know that, for example, in the government system, they will just transfer teachers. Now, there you have no control because your successor is not determined by you. It's determined by somebody sitting in an office somewhere who will just say this one takes over. But let's just say that even in that situation, you can build people. You can build people who will not necessarily take up the position you're in, but they can go and be successful elsewhere. I think one of the missions we have as the people of God is to disciple. That is a part of the Great Commission. When you've learned principles, Jesus said, teaching them to observe all I've taught you. Jesus taught about everything. He didn't only teach about church things, as we call them. He taught about his teachings cover all of life. So can we live with other people and those under us in a way that we build them up as leaders? They may not take our seat, but they will learn from us, and those things that they learn, they will take somewhere else. So there are places that are limited by that sort of situation. You don't have a say, but you can still leave a legacy. You can still leave a good part of your life in these people, so that when God promotes them sometime, they will talk about you. They may not say that so-and-so gave me this job, but they'll say that I learned ABCD from the person, from my time with that person. One of the things that, even when we do recruitments, we talk about Jubilee Dental here, one of the prayers we pray, say, Lord, we don't want people who are not supposed to be here. But if anyone is supposed to be there, let them come so that whatever we are doing here, they will learn and they'll have another season somewhere else. But this will not just be a job. It will be a time when they are picking up things that they will carry somewhere else. And that should be everywhere we're involved, even our workers at home, domestic workers, they're not part of the family, but we have two girls at home and they didn't grow up both of them don't have fathers. Okay, they had fathers, of course, others wouldn't be here, but what I'm saying, they had no relationship with their fathers. We've been doing the Lord's Prayer at our family altar, and the other day we just considered on the line Our Father, and they were both saying, look, we have never really known what a father should do, but we've seen it in this family, you know. So in a way, they are workers, but over the years, they're more or less become like our children, you know. Can we have that mindset that wherever we are, we deposit life in other people? And I think you've got my point anyway, so I don't have to say anymore. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. James. We are very grateful. I think it can be, if it is possible and well with you, you can share maybe your contact, and if someone, because I see their main question, but if in case you can share your contacts, in case someone is having a burning question, he can maybe contact you and you elaborate more for him. I don't know how possible can it be for you to share your contact for them and they get in touch with you more. And as we are planning to wind up, I thank you very much for keeping this time up to now. I know we are very late, but we are trying our level best